Hello, my name is Tali Katz-Gero. I'm from the Department of Sociology at the University of Haifa in Israel. I'm very happy to be part of this conference. And today, the title of my talk is The Smart Cultural City and Digital Creativity, Digital Engagement of Cultural Consumers During the Pandemic. Before I begin, let me share my screen so you can see my slides. I will start with an introduction to the topics that I will try to cover in today's talk. I will begin by discussing some definitions of a smart cultural city or the cultural aspect in smart cities. And then I will move on to asking some research questions that I will try to answer by empirical data. I will ask what kind of uses did digital platforms serve for individuals during the COVID-19 lockdowns? What are individuals' perceptions of such digital services? What can we learn about online engagement in a post-pandemic world? And what can cultural policy do to promote current trends? Starting with a definition of the cultural aspects in smart cities and what exactly we're talking about. A smart city is a framework to develop, deploy, and promote sustainable development practices to address growing urbanization challenges, mainly through information and communication technologies. So we have plenty of definitions of smart cities, and this is one I like in particular because it's short, it's clear, and it can be applied to the cultural sphere. Cloud-based Internet of Things applications receive, analyze, and manage data in real time to help municipalities, enterprises, and citizens make better decisions that improve quality of life. And we know that citizens engage with smart city ecosystems in various ways by using their smartphones, other mobile devices, connected cars, connected homes. We also know that a smart city can cut costs, improve sustainability. Communities can improve energy distribution, streamline trash collection, decrease traffic, improve air quality. But what exactly does it do to culture? And what does smart city mean when it comes to culture? What are the cultural implications of this model of a smart city? The smart cities model proposes 6 key fields of urban development: smart economy, smart mobility, smart environment, people, living, governance. But concern for culture is not explicit. So we know that culture has to do with living, it has to do with people, it has to do with governance. But how exactly does it figure in these 6 domains or key fields? When it comes to cultural and leisure activities and facilities, to education, art, tourism, how does culture work in the smart city? This is something that hasn't been discussed in the literature enough. Before we continue, and while we think about the definition of the smart city in the context of culture, we can ask, why is smart culture in the city important? Why is it something that we should pay attention to? And here I would like to propose several answers. Smart culture in the city is important because of its central role in shaping inequality. We know that cultural consumption and participation and tastes and dispositions are stratified in society and in many ways contribute to the production or reproduction of inequalities. We know that there's a central role for culture in shaping social structures, in driving social hierarchies, in shaping social cleavages. We have a lot of research about the processes of cultural stratification, which refers to the relationship between cultural consumption patterns, the competencies they bring with them, and structures of power and inequality in society. So for all these reasons, it's important to look at the cultural aspects of smart cities. Another important reason is that culture influences social cohesion. Cultural participation is a process where social groups move or can move from the margins of society to the center. Culture can remove symbolic barriers, for example, to newcomers, to migrants. A major aspect of cultural participation involves taking part in culture and developing a meaningful relationship with the culture, with arts, which contributes to social cohesion and solidarity. Such a relationship to the center of society is responsible for people becoming more socially adaptable, better informed, better integrated into wider society. And finally, it's important to think of smart cities in the context of culture because culture is central to policy and is becoming more so in recent years. From the point of view of cultural policy, cultural participation is a final stage in a complex cycle that includes the production and consumption of cultural products, symbols, experiences. It includes both cultural producers and cultural consumers. And these topics have received considerable attention in recent years. Cultural policy often sees culture as a merit good, and the state, national, local, state, and government find it very important to invest in culture because culture is a merit good. A merit good is a good or a service that the government feels that people will underconsume or people are likely to underconsume, and which ought to be subsidized or provided for free. This is because consumption of this good or service should not depend primarily on the ability to pay for it, because it can generate positive externalities, meaning that the social benefits from consumption of culture, for example, can exceed the private benefit. We can argue that cultural participation is a merit good. We can argue that because cultural participation can provide skills that are transferable to other realms. Cultural participation, engagement in culture and the arts can be meaningful for upward mobility. It can increase employability. It can help reinforce self-confidence. We know for sure that it affects educational attainment, educational aspirations, educational performance. Cultural engagement shapes social networks. It provides outlets for the expression of cultural diversity. In a global economy, which is driven by knowledge, by ideas, cultural competency is a necessity. Cultural participation contributes to community vitality, to wellness and healthy aging. So we have plenty of research showing that cultural participation is extremely important, can be considered a merit good, and should be viewed by policy as something really important, as a really important activity, also in the context of smart cities. So following this introduction, we can ask several questions. We see that there's only a handful of studies that have addressed cultural aspects of smart cities. So we can ask ourselves, why is that so? We see that theoretical discourse in the area of smart culture is limited and tends to focus on digitization in cultural heritage or digital museums or access to digital collections. Smart culture allows a personalized consumption experience. It reduces barriers of time, of cost, of distance. And we also know that smart culture can increase access to culture for special needs individuals. So we do have research looking at those issues. We also know that in the economic sphere, smart culture introduces new business opportunities. But we don't know much about how smart culture in the city looks like, or how smart cities can operate in the realm of culture and cultural participation, cultural engagement. We don't know exactly what kind of access to culture in the smart city is beneficial for residents, or what kind of obstacles they may confront. So these are some of the questions that I will try to address right now. And I will report on findings from research I'm currently involved in. The acronym of the research is INVENT, and the long title is European Inventory of Societal Values of Culture as a Basis for Inclusive Cultural Policies. This is a Horizon 2020 research project, which involves 9 countries. They're all listed in the slide. And I'm leading the team that conducts this research in the UK. This is my team. I will provide the website address of the project later on, so you can get more information if this is of interest. So moving on to some of the questions I would like to address today, and presenting the empirical research. Our starting point will be the first lockdown in the UK. On March 2020, lockdown was announced in the UK due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The lockdown included wide-ranging restrictions on freedom of movement. Non-essential businesses, including cultural venues and restaurants, were closed. Individuals were directed to stay home and were not allowed to socialize with family members or friends who live in separate households. And such restrictions made those living in the UK reshape the ways in which they engage with culture. One of the questions we ask in our INVENT project is what changes in cultural engagement took place during the time of the lockdown, and how did individuals feel about them? I will report today on findings from an exploratory survey that we conducted in June and July 2020 using a snowball method. We distributed a short questionnaire through several platforms, and we had a non-representative sample of 100 respondents. Last week, we embarked on data collection of a real survey, not an exploratory one, again in the UK. This will be based on an online panel, and it will include around 1,500 respondents. We are going to ask very similar questions to the ones I will be presenting today. So in the future, in the near future, we're hoping to be able to present the results of this survey that we are currently fielding. Going back to the exploratory survey, we identified 3 major themes in the answers that we received from participants. The first theme has to do with decrease or increase in social interactions and the sense of togetherness in terms of cultural engagement following the pandemic. The second theme has to do with opportunities versus barriers. And the third theme has to do with tension between spaces. And I will briefly go over each theme. So the first thing we realized was that some participants in the survey are experiencing a decrease, while others are experiencing an increase in social interactions and in a sense of togetherness. And this also had to do with their cultural engagement. Respondents who reported a significant reduction in their social interactions shared that due to the lockdown, they cannot go to work or socialize with friends. Another participant felt isolated from other people and from her culture. And she said holidays celebrated alone, languages that go unspoken, and always feeling like an outsider in the current country I live in. In contrast to such accounts, others felt closer to their families and to people in their immediate environments, such as their neighbors. The new situation forced people to interact with communities based on local geography rather than cultural echo chambers across a more dispersed geography. So we found that while internet access and digital technology allowed some people to feel more connected and to explore more opportunities, others felt more isolated and more limited. This finding joins a recent YouGov survey in the UK, in which 40% of respondents reported that their social bonds with their local communities have become tighter during the lockdown. However, if one's immediate community is culturally different than their own, this might increase feelings of isolation and loneliness during the lockdown. The second theme that we identified has to do with opportunities and barriers, or a contrast between the two. Some respondents highlighted their inability to travel or engage in cultural practices and found online access to be an unsatisfactory substitute. Various degrees of digital literacy, of course, are central factors in feeling that access through the internet is an obstacle rather than an enabler. On the other hand, other respondents found new opportunities during the lockdown as the circumstances presented an opportunity to be more rather than less creative. So we have a quote here about an enormous flourishing of cultural practices, especially online. Creativity has gone through the roof as people have had to find other media for their cultural expression. Another person said, I've missed going to the theater and concerts, but have enjoyed good drama at home. I'm dancing most days with friends via Zoom, and I'm listening to more music with Spotify. Other methods of exploring my art and passion, says another. It has reduced my social interaction with friends and colleagues. It has encouraged me to plan my social activities and access contents through the internet. So both opportunities and barriers, but very different experiences to different people. The final theme involves a tension between spaces where the home becomes a mixed-use space in which work and leisure blend with each other. So this is also an important dimension to consider when we try to understand the features of culture in a future possible smart city. A male respondent in his 30s explained that the lockdown made him connect to a more holistic sense of culture as something inseparable to work, home, art, and social life, rather than a discrete set of rooms. Free and convenient ways to be in places or shows I would have not been. So the mixing between spaces where we spend more time at home, raising a family, working, engaging in culture, engaging in hobbies, this is a very significant dimension. In addition, we also noticed that there could be significant differences between different groups, for example, based on gender, age, education. For example, more male participants compared with female reported the lockdown as presenting barriers to engaging with culture. So the themes that emerge from our data in the UK point to a division. While some feel a lack in social interactions, others find a new sense of togetherness. Some identify opportunities in social restrictions, while others emphasize the barriers they encountered when trying to consume culture. And again, similar findings have recently been reported in other exploratory studies. While some independently found creative ways to connect with their families, friends, communities, and culture, there is definitely room for governmental responsibility to ensure that cultural engagement will be accessible for all. The last few months have offered an opportunity to observe what happens to everyday cultural engagement in times of crisis. From this, we can learn about what culture means to individuals and how to mitigate barriers to engaging with culture in future crises. And as I said before, cultural policy is increasingly interested in these dimensions. The 2019-2022 European Commission Work Plan for Culture sets out 5 main priorities for European cooperation in cultural policy making, with 5 priorities, one of them being cohesion and well-being, which I mentioned at the beginning of my talk. And we can ask, how will engagement in culture in the smart city affect the diverse population groups? And how can cultural policy in the UK, which has long emphasized equality and diversity, prepare for that? So I would like to propose a program for the study of culture in the smart city. And this program has several stages or several components that try to put together the things I've reported at the beginning in terms of what we know from the literature and some of the insights I've discussed in terms of the preliminary exploratory data that we already have. So the program for the study of culture in the smart city. First of all, it should be co-produced research with co-researchers from the community. That should be part of the research from the early stages of research design, helping the researchers think about the goals, about the questions, about the methods, about the framework. A second component in this program is research that involves a variety of stakeholders, again, from early stages of the research design and throughout the project life. When thinking about culture in the smart city, it's important to consider private, public, non-governmental, not-for-profit stakeholders, in addition to residents and neighborhoods. A third component in the program for the study of culture in the smart city is to think of creative measures of cultural participation. So try to move away from the traditional ways in which we usually measure cultural participation and think more of, first of all, acknowledging the ever-changing cultural hierarchization of culture that is typical of postmodern consumers, and the fact that the value of different domains and genres and types of culture and arts keeps changing. And also think of processes of migration and globalization that provide the backdrop for a continuous search for innovation, in which traditional cultural hierarchies diffuse with new forms of cultural capital, so that otherwise marginalized social groups are able to act as symbolic innovators. A fourth component is the evaluation of the impact of cultural participation. So if we see that cultural participation in the digitalized smart city looks differently for different types of people, not only in terms of digital literacy, but also in terms of age and education and other skills and competencies, it's really important to find ways to differentially measure the impact of digital engagement in culture to different types of people. A fifth component recommends that research design is longitudinal so that we can follow engagement in digital culture and the impact of this engagement and the types of measures of cultural participation. We can follow all these over time to be able to make more robust conclusions. A sixth component is to look at sector-specific questions and sector-specific methods and research design, mainly by demographics. So we should treat different groups in terms of gender, age, socioeconomic status, religion, race, ethnicity, education. We should treat those groups in different ways because we suspect that there may be significant difference in the way they approach smart culture in the city, the way they can make use of it, and the benefits that it brings with it. The seventh component has to do with an emphasis on local and regional levels. So again, because the geographical boundaries disappear or can disappear when we think of digital culture and access to culture through the internet, it's important to look at both global, national, regional, local levels and to see whether there are differences in all the questions that were posed previously. And the final component in the research program is attention to globalization of cultural flows and to intersectionality. And I will give one example that has to do with religion. Religion is a major social cleavage that should be factored in when studying smart cities and culture, in particular in the context of global cities and in the context of super diversity. Religion has a significant impact on consumption, mainly through prescriptions such as the ones in clothing, grooming, art, music, and so on, that believers are expected to observe. So when we think of the intersection of religion with gender, with age, with education, with other dimensions, this can have a significant consequence on the distribution of cultural practices and on the outcome of cultural skills and their possible impact. I will stop here. I thank you very much for your attention. If you would like more information about the INVENT project, which includes many more interesting questions and insights, this is the URL of the project. And I look forward to discussing my and the other talks in the conference. Thank you very much.